So yeah, I think since we started this project, it's been, as Pam said, actually it's been almost 2 years from when we interviewed. And to do an interview for a project like this, you do a bunch of research just to figure out where this place is and what it's all about and understand it. So we've been thinking about this for a long time. I think since then I've grown a beard and my hair is grayer. I've become I think I'm almost a regular at Henry's. I think I've had dinner there with those guys more than I have, I think, with my wife over the last year. So anyway, but this thing says master plan, and that's important. It sounds like, man, this thing is over, right? But it's not. This is really the beginning, and I think everybody in this room has to keep that in mind, that the goal here is to push this master plan along, right? The master plan says, hey, we all got together. These are the things we want to do, all the research points that we can do these things in these directions. But now we have to all, get together and make it happen. And the fact that there's so many people here tonight, it's a huge deal. You guys should be very proud. We do things like this. I don't know, in like cities like Austin that everybody thinks, everyone loves their city of Austin. If I get 50 people to come to something like this, it's huge. This is amazing. This means that this is going to be a success. That's the most important thing. So, I've been showing these images around every time I come to town, and this was research we did when we first started the project. I think this was in our very first presentation. And it's a group called the Hoosier Group, and they're painters that studied in France, but they were from Indiana, and they painted beautiful scenes around Indiana. And so I thought these were fitting. Hey, they are about authenticity of what is this riverfront all about. But it's time to move from, I think, the past into something that's more about the future. And so this is the future, right? This is maybe the future people that study these sort of things will say, oh, I found these really great renderings of Fort Wayne's riverfront, in 2015. So this is what we're heading towards. And so we're going to talk about these things in more detail. Basically, what we're going to be looking at are places that have urban appendages that come out onto the river that you can actually get out there and really do some interesting things that you can't do now. Places where there's lots of beautiful light, activities, there's music and things going on. Places that are quiet, that are more just about community, not about shopping and spending money and retail and things. Places just to hang out with your community, your friends and your neighbors. And things that are artful and beautiful, right? Places that work great, for dining, different types of opportunities that we don't currently have in Fort Wayne. Lots of different layers to riparian settings, places next to rivers, different ways to think about that. Places for people to get together, and do things on the river that they're doing already, but to make it much more accessible so that everybody can do it, and it becomes a big draw. People are coming here to check out Fort Wayne's river from all over the region. There's places that should be very community, a big sort of front porch that the community hangs out on, and they come and get together. And you guys can kind of decide what you're going to do and when you're going to do it in these sort of spaces. And there might be little boat docks and things that are down on the river where you can actually catch maybe Dan Wyer's pontoon boat or grab a paddle board. And these things are floating, right? They go up and down with the river. They do all these sort of things that react to the realities of trying to design a place that sits on a very active river. And they have to work in the wintertime as well. So if that place was today, it would look like this. But we want you guys to be able to go down there and do things in the wintertime. It shouldn't just be a 4-month or a 2-season type place. It needs to work all the time. So these are some of the things that we're going to be talking about. So the study area, let's talk about where are we working. Some of you guys maybe haven't come to some of these events before. So we're basically talking about this big zone here. It's about 2.6 miles of river. 18% of the study area is water, so we have to think about that. And that's really the draw. That's the reason we're doing this. But it's a lot of land. There's Headwaters Park. Here's the water treatment facility. There's Bloomingdale Park is over here. Lawton Park is up there. So a lot of different things are going on. And we're constantly aware of all of the great things that have happened downtown and how this stuff here and that stuff there work together to create new catalysts, new things for people to do, and new ways for people to explore their city. We give things names so that we can all think about what they are. So we have the confluence here, the old fort, that's not a new name, Lawton Park, Wells Corridor, the Headwaters Park, the promenade, we're going to talk about that in detail, and then the 2 parks that are down at this end. So, the mission, right? This is what we said from the beginning that we were going to do. going to establish a framework for action, right? So that's what this is. It's a plan that says these are the things that we want to take action on. We're going to do these things. To maximize the use and value of Fort Wayne's rivers. So we've kind of abandoned those rivers. They used to have a lot of value to industry and transportation, not as much anymore. We want to figure out what a new type of value that they can bring to the city. Increased recreational use, restoration, enhancement, and development, right? So we want to enhance the rivers, protect them, make them all that they can possibly be, but at the same time, where appropriate, put development along the river so that there's other types of things, catalytic opportunities that can make people come down there and do things they haven't done previously. And these things add up over time, right? So when people come to the rivers today, and then they come again when these things are built, they're going to start thinking about them differently. And things that happen upstream right now that maybe are making issues for water quality, you're going to start to have policies changing. People are going to demand change and how all this stuff works. So these things have ripple effects, and that's a big part of these projects, is realizing that you have to do little things that create bigger things, bigger things, bigger things. That's a big part of this plan. So guiding principles that came out of the processes of talking with you guys, we want a sense of community. We want this place to be authentic and sustainable. People want a lot of recreation and different kinds of recreation. They want economic development to happen along the river. Take advantage of this really great river system that you guys have. Accessibility and connectivity. It needs to connect to the neighborhoods and the things that are already happening within the city. We can't just sort of make this be a standalone project that doesn't think about all the other things that are happening. And of course, public health and safety. We're putting people on a river, a great body of water that floods and does all sorts of things. We have to be cognizant of that and design with that stuff in mind. Okay, so we've gone through a huge process, at least a year of talking with people trying to understand what they want. I get, every couple of weeks, I get a handwritten letter from someone from Fort Wayne telling me about how great their city is. They have this wonderful idea, this thing that they want to do. That's amazing. It's like there's people that can go on and do Mind Mixer, Facebook surveys and all that, but the fact that people take the time to write a letter, put a stamp on it, bring it to the post office, that's huge. That means people love this place and they really want to see it succeed. So, things that have gone on, a year of community outreach, 4 public meetings, hundreds of people have showed up. All these comments, there's the project website that people have gone to share information. There's the Envision Center. Anytime that I've been there, people just drop in. They have little comments, little ideas. It's just been a constant thing. And that's going to keep going, by the way. So a lot of the graphics you'll see later tonight will be at the Envision Center. And just conversations with city staff. Engineers are toughest crowd, man. They look at this stuff like they tell us you can do this, but you can't do that. So all that stuff has to be taken into consideration. And we have engineers on our team. We have an economist on our team. We have all the people that can help us as designers dig into the nitty-gritty to make it actually work. So, when we had people, well, I should back up. You don't vote on a plan. A great plan isn't the series of just sort of elections and votes, but it does gauge the things that people are interested in. And you don't want to go out and do something that people aren't interested in because they won't use it, right? So, as it sort of worked out here, this sort of waterfront promenade is the thing that has always risen to the top. When people have asked, what do we want? They want that thing because it's different than what we have along the rivers right now. When I started the project, I thought parks and open space would be the thing. But what we have found out in going through the process is that, yeah, that's great. We want some of that. But we have a lot of great parks and open space. We want something that's fresh and new and different. So that's risen to the top, and that's a big part of what we're going to look at here. So, master plan, like I said, this is a beginning, not an end. We'll talk later about what happens after this. So these are the primary places that we're dealing with. Drink some water so I don't stop talking. Primary places that we're dealing with. And this becomes a master plan, right? So this is a pretty drawing with all this stuff on it, and we can spend a lot of time going over all the details with it, and we will when we look at the graphics up here. But in general, we're talking about lots of different interesting things that are happening within Lawton Park, a very different kind of park than it is today. It's a very different kind of park than I think this region actually has. It's a place that's highly programmed. People can do lots of different things with their neighbors and their community. It's not just sort of the old-fashioned idea of a park where it's a bucolic place and you're trying to get away from the Industrial Revolution or something. These are parks that are for people that are strapped to iPhones all day long and they're like constantly distracted and they want to go outside and recreate, but they need that kind of that little buzz they get out of all that distraction, right? But it's an interesting kind of park. It has education as a big part of it. All these sort of things that make a really fun experience and a different kind of experience. And it works really well with the things that are already happening at Headwaters Park. As we come down here, this is the zone that we're calling the promenade. This is phase 1. We're going to look at that in detail. This park is different than Lawton. This is Golden and Bloomingdale Park. The idea there is it's more about nature, less about programmed activities. So they're these sort of opposites, yin and yang, trying to get some balance. And the confluence, we want to make a statement there, but we don't want to just decorate the confluence just to do it. So we'll look at that in more detail too. But behind a master plan, and the city is going to be receiving a big, thick book full of all the technical documents that actually make something like this work. It's easy to sit down at your desk and just draw a plan. People might like this. I think it's cool. That's not what it's about. It's about all the technical stuff. It's about asking people what they want and trying to figure out how those things really work together. So there's land use plans. Some things will have to change. Certain zoning restrictions and land use restrictions will change in order to make this plan a reality. So we're going to have to go in and study how that works and how that affects neighboring properties. There are circulation things. So a lot of upgrades we're looking at to streets. Say Superior Street, for example. Very different kind of street that we're envisioning in the future. Less emphasis on cars and more emphasis on people. They say if you build streets for cars, you get lots of cars, right? If you build streets for people and cars, you get both. And that's what we want to do. But updates to bridges that cross at Harrison, for example. Looking at changing some roads that exist at 4th Street and moving those around. But lots of upgrades to streetscapes. And then pedestrian, other types of circulation. That's very important. We want people to be able to ride their bikes, walk. Compact development is sort of a major identity of this development, of this district that we want to keep pushing. So maybe the beginnings of all of that pedestrian activity starts at the Wells Street Bridge. We kind of see that little historic piece as ground zero where everything kind of starts to move out. When we go in and start to design streets, we want them to be like sponges, right? When water hits that street and just runs off as fast as it can into the river and the river rises as fast as it can. That's the way we did things 50 years ago. Nowadays we want streets to be sponges and we want them to be great places for people to walk. So this might be Clinton Street. So there'd be Lawton Park on this side. And you can see stormwater's captured in these little places and they act like little mini rivers. We want to use the same plants that grow along the edges of the rivers, big trees and things. We want to use those as street trees and the plants that actually become these sponges. So that river district idea moves up the roads into the heart of the city. It's not just confined to the river's edge. On Superior Street, and we'll see some illustrations here in a minute, but the idea is that, if that's a building facade, you're looking at a plan view, that there are places where what's inside spills out onto the sidewalk. There's head-in parking. I think it's 4 lanes now. We can easily get that down to 2 lanes. There's just not that much traffic there. And it creates a place that's a much more pedestrian-friendly zone. So this might be a section where you have a new building that sits here, and a little outdoor cafe, some identity signage, parking, 2 lanes of traffic, a place for someone to ride a bicycle. It's dedicated to that. All those sort of things start to work within Superior Street. And as I keep saying, let's make Superior Street more superior. Right? And then other streets that happen, maybe a new kind of road that's along the river, just one little section. But as you move along that, you can see the river, all the things that are going on. There's people out there having a great time. You want to be a part of it. We want to be sure that people can see what's happening with all this investment that happens. So there's different layers to that, and maybe the road is kind of pulled back and your river's down here. So it might look something like that in the future. We're also thinking about bridges. So we want people to be able to circulate, right? If you don't want to go out for a 5-mile walk from one end of the river to the other, you should be able to do a little quarter-mile walk, right? And Harrison Street Bridge, I think, is a great candidate for putting it on a road diet, so there's less emphasis on traffic, and having some of that space then dedicated to people. So you could actually hang out on the bridge in the evenings if you wanted to, or in the morning, whenever. And it becomes the bridge becomes part of that open space system, a part of that promenade system. So let's dig into kind of the heart of the project, which is the promenade. This would be the first phase of development that would be done. And it's the piece that we've studied the most since the last time we were here. And it's basically phase 1 is this zone that's in red. You have to start with something. And the idea is to start with something that's big and is a lot of fun, and again is very different, but it becomes a catalyst that helps in all the other pieces then happen in their future phases. Okay, so this is what we have now. There's Headwaters Park over here. We've got Harrison Street. There's the Wells Street Bridge. This is the Pepsi plant. There's some buildings that, here have kind of turned their back on the river. Steep bank along here, a little bit more shallow, a levee along here. There's a memorial you'll see right here. So this is what that starts to look like. So the idea here is taking Wells Street Bridge and really celebrating that as kind of the centerpiece. It's this beautiful historic bridge. And then building this big, call it a deck, this big community deck that everyone can come down and hang out at this deck, right? So there's places that are very civic. Everyone just hangs out and has a great time. Guys with banjos show up and play music, whatever. Guys with paddle boards show up and they, hook up their paddle boards and they can get out and just sort of hang out there. You can watch people doing all sorts of stuff. And on the other side, it tries to be more development friendly, right? So we want to keep these balances. We don't want this all about one thing. So if there's a place to have a restaurant or grab something from a shop, that happens on this side, and there's some of it on this side, but it's primarily about the south side of the river. There's also housing, right? So we want to take advantage of really great views. So we see ground floor retail, and above that would be residential. So this might be a view of what you start to see. So that Wells Street Bridge is here. That big deck piece that we've talked about is right there. It steps down to the river here. Here's kind of up above, and you have these great views looking down the river from each side. You can see restaurant terraces, maybe on a second floor, as well as little promenade side cafes down below. A great little pocket park down here that might have food trucks and other types of vendors within it. And then you see lots of nature on this side. So while this side, yes, there's a riparian strip, and we're always trying to celebrate the river, it feels a bit more urban and more connected to the city. The other side wants to feel a bit more like open space, more nature, but still a different kind of nature. Sculpted, we've tried to really make it do things that are very contemporary types of forms. And then you start to see different developments that are happening. This right here, there's a guy here that has a choo-choo train, and he would like to park it here. This is a huge tourist thing already, and the idea is that, people are already flying from like Australia to come to Fort Wayne to see this train, and you'll see more about it later. But the idea is that as a tourist attraction could be a big centerpiece of probably of phase 1. And this is being studied sort of as a independent track, get it? That you guys are supposed to laugh at that. As an independent track to study the feasibility of that and how that fits into the project as well. You can see a big pedestrian bridge, so you can do all of these little arcs, and short little runs around if you wanted to. It makes it a place that's just fun to go out and walk around. You don't have to spend money, and you don't have to be dining or anything. You don't have to be on a paddleboard. You can just show up, and I think it'll be a great time. So this is a little zoom in. You can see the Fort Wayne Outfitters right here in the old depot. So everything's kind of built around that. And that, we got a lot of inspiration from that. That's a small business that's in Fort Wayne that's very unique. It's growing. And we think that all the sort of things that people are starting to do within that, we want more of that, and that to spill out into the community as a whole. So here we go. We're down on the north side of the river. Big floating deck. It's probably concrete. It might have some sort of wood veneer pieces. It might be have some stone inserts, but it's got to be a piece that floats up and down with the river as it comes and goes. It's got to handle all the ice flows and things that go on. So this is robust, difficult construction. But things like this are built all the time. We know how to do it. And this is going to be, I think, an amazing place to spend time. Up here, you start to see people hanging out on this big deck system, right? There might be some shops back here. Maybe it's a place that you get recreational sporting equipment, for example, other types of things. You can see the pedestrian bridge in the background. And kids just running around, playing with, picking wildflowers, having a great day in the sun. In the wintertime, it changes, but it still functions great. There's a trail instead of a bike trail now. It's a cross-country ski trail. I heard about a bike today that's got giant knobby tires on it that you can actually ride in the snow. Dan was telling me about it. So maybe it's got both on it. But all those sort of things happen. Warming huts, it's cold in the winter. Maybe there's places you can hang out down there. There's some heat source. It's managed and maintained by the entity that's going to run the river district. All those little ideas. Back to summertime or spring, it's springtime, right? Still a little bit chilly, but everybody's taking off their jackets and they're going outside, they're having dinner. And you see all these great promenades and these big boardwalks and these places where there's outdoor dining and there's art. And things are, you can see the architecture is contemporary, right? When this bridge was built, that was the state of the art. They weren't thinking 100 years ago, let's make a bridge that looks like it's 100 years old. They said, let's make the best bridge we could possibly make. That's what we want to do with the architecture here, right? It needs to be contemporary, state-of-the-art, the best thing that we can do right now. And that's what we want to celebrate, I think, as a part of the architecture and the whole design scheme for the project. Wintertime, right? Big fire pits come out. There might be some big event like the Hot Chocolate Festival, which someone has picked up and is actually going to be happening this weekend, which is pretty cool. But this is a place where that sort of stuff can start to take root. And we can extend the seasons by getting people outside on the river. Maybe it's the solstice or something, and everyone's out having a great time, hoping the sun comes back. And I love this one. It's the evening, it's the summertime, maybe it's 4th of July. There's fireworks, but also trying to do things with fire and water down on the river. Remember, our river here operates a little bit like a lake. It's dammed, which means it's not just water rushing through. It's very controlled. Most of the year, we can kind of keep it at one steady elevation. And I think that opens up a lot of opportunities for how all of these pieces interact with one another. So we also have to think about floodwaters. Water comes up and down because sometimes it's a lake and sometimes it's a river, right? So this is where the water normally is. That's probably the top of the dam elevation. And this is a 100-year floodplain. That's where we don't want anything up there that would that can't get wet. So everything that's below here is designed so that it can be within that floodplain, and everything that's above is designed to kind of keep back and away from it so that there are no conflicts. Where things get more complicated, we want to come in and have beautiful riparian vegetation, but we want to push these decks and pieces and buildings as well up above the floodplain and make sure that no downstream or upstream flooding occurs. All these engineering models that we run, we're in the middle of doing all those to prove out how all this stuff works so that there are no conflicts with that. So Headwaters Junction, there's that cool train I was telling you guys about. So the idea is that will be a big tourist attraction. It's a part of this new river district. And this is a sketch that was done as a part of this independent study that's being done sort of separate to this one. But it's a very serious proposal, and it's a very serious roundhouse that's being considered. This is for a different site, but the idea is to take this and move it to our site now. So, there's always money involved in these things, and how fast can we build things? There's phasing. There's all the sort of developers that we have to talk to. There's city, state, federal agencies. The idea is to start with phase 1A, which is basically what you see here. So it's the heart of the river, which is Wells Street and this big deck system that we're talking about. Some residential, some retail, and the numbers basically work out like this. We've worked with an economist. This stuff is not just sort of made up and pulled out of a hat. A lot of research and interviews with developers has gone into it. This is equal to, you could think of that as about 4 restaurants like Club Soda, for example. The retail, that's probably 10 shops that would be in phase 1A. Office space, that's looking at using some of the older buildings and adaptive reuse so they become office. And then, a boutique hotel, residential, parking, of course, that drives everything. We want people to walk as much as possible, but parking's a real deal. Then phase 1B grows out of the first one, right? So the first one gets it going. Now everybody sees, man, that's a huge success. I want to be a part of it. So other developers come in and start doing things. Then we add the museum piece for the railroad. All those things start to expand and create more of a catalyst. More people want to be a part of it. Success breeds success, right? So that's phase 1B, which then has more restaurants, more ground floor retail, the cultural attraction, which is the museum piece. So it just kind of keeps going from there. So then pieces that follow that. We have not yet, or at least for this presentation, said what phase 2 or 3 or 4 will be, but that will be part of this sort of final plan that we'll be giving the city over the next weeks. But Lawton Park, that's what I thought. I thought maybe this would be phase 1, and come to find out, it's not going to be phase 1. But hopefully it's phase 2 or something. We'll see. But the idea is that, keep an eye on 4th Street here. The idea of how much land is right here. This is a substation, all of the greenhouses that the Parks Department uses, and that's Science Central up there. So that becomes this. So it's a very different idea. Colors are a little different. What we're looking at doing is saying, let's excavate some of this so we do have a space that really kind of operates like a big pool of water, more of a lake. Kids can rent pedal boats and canoes and all sorts of things happen there. There's a big promenade with all these sort of event spaces that happen along the edges of it. We want to see a big adventure playground that's part of Science Central that basically capitalizes on what's already happening there, a place for kids. We want to take Spy Run Creek and actually make that a very environmentally sensitive place, but put people in it so they can learn about nature and see how natural restoration really works. There's little bridges and things. There's zip lines and pieces that are moving through it. Along Clinton Street, we want to have places that are maybe berms and mounds that hide the park from some of the traffic that moves through that road at a fairly high pace. This is where the beach is. So you'll see the beach is not touching the water. People are very sensitive to water conditions right now, and we want to be very cognizant of that. So we have a beach, because I think there's a lot of beach-type activities that would be great to be able to do in Fort Wayne. So what does this stuff look like? So this is a quick rendering that just sort of shows, look, here's this big beach. There's people doing, they're sunbathing. There's maybe they can have bonfires in the evening. There might be some little water features that are great for kids to hang out, little splash park things. Sunshade, of course. And then down on the river, there's a big dragon boat festival going on, which, by the way, you guys are getting one. I think it's in May. There's going to be a dragon boat festival that's going to be going on. I did it when I lived in Portland, Oregon. It's a blast. If you don't think you know anything about dragon boating, perfect. You're the guy that needs to go out there and do it. It's fun. And so it might be like this, people sunbathing and they're throwing sand on each other. And there's the river down there, and there's canoes and maybe some floating platform and the big promenade that moves along. And if it was a day like today, maybe the beach looks like that. So you're burying people in snow instead of sand. But as these things get managed and programmed, right, the entities that run these things set up all kinds of events to make them useful throughout the year. So you can see they've set up little warming pieces here. There's some warmth and fire. Hopefully that kid doesn't burn himself, but we'll design around that, I'm sure. And I like the idea that there's shelters in the winters. If there's a cross-country ski course or something that we do, that there's places to hang out and you can kind of get out of the wind and just sort of watch birds for a while, do whatever you want to do in nature in these parks. Spilling out of Science Central, a big adventure play area that would attract people, I think, from around the region to come to this place. And kids love this stuff. Parents love it because their kids are occupied. They can maybe go to the cafe that's in the park and have coffee while the kids are doing crazy stuff here and learning at the same time. But there needs to be boardwalks and places where people can do things like painting out in a park. We should be able to set up temporary BMX courses, right? We can do that. You can come in and sculpt these things, invite there's professional bike riders that do stuff like this. Who knew? You can invite them in, and it could be a huge thing. There's spectators. People want to pay money to go watch these events. And then later on, kids will just come and tear it up and have a great time. Zip lines that maybe go along Spy Creek. And a skate park, right? So right now, I think personally the skate park's in the wrong place. It's right on the river, and what is it really when you drive by it? It's a big fence, right? And we don't want a big fence in front of the river. So I say let's take the skate park and move it to a more appropriate place. It's a little deeper into the park and make it even bigger and better than it is now. So Golden and Bloomingdale Park, so this is the other end. This area is more about nature. So we have the river moving through here, our 2 park spaces. There's the levee is right there, okay? So that gets transformed into something like this. What we've done here is we've pulled the levee back, so the river's a little less straitjacketed. It's more natural. As the waters come up and down, they're able to do the things that rivers really do. We have these boardwalks. On the low side, this is kind of the floodplain side, so low boardwalks, wetlands. There's an outdoor education center. And then on the high side, this is the high bank. There's probably bird blinds and observation towers and places where you can get above the river, look out at it. So these things might look like this. You might have places like this where you can get up in these towers and kind of look out and check out things and do a lot of birding. That's a big tourist thing. People come and they spend money to stay in hotels and eat hamburgers and look at birds. That's a huge deal in the country right now. A canoe trail. And I think most importantly, a neighborhood park where people can bring stuff and barbecue, hang out with their friends and neighbors and feel very comfortable, but it's set up for this stuff, so it's easy to do. An urban ecology center, so you can learn about nature. But these places you can also rent out to the public. People oftentimes, they want to go to these places when they're beautifully designed buildings. They want to have weddings there. They want to have parties there. We need to think about how these things are mixed use. The old fort, look, it could be really an awesome thing. When we got started, people were asking the question, should we keep this thing? Do we keep it? What do we do with it? Yes, we need to keep it, but we need to make it really robust and wonderful. So it needs parking. We need to think about how that works. We need connectivity between Lawton Park and Headwaters Park so you can actually get there. They should have a big event lawn where they can do their reenactments of the old battles. And they should have Chief Little Turtle's canoe launch, right? You can, rent a canoe, birch bark canoe and sink it, is because you don't know what you're doing, but it could be a blast. And then this is the thing that we invented last time, which I don't know, I think it's great. It's not proper English or anything, but the sphere of confluence. Stolen from sphere of influence, of course. But I think the question here has been repeatedly, what do we do with this thing? Like, we need to mark the confluence. This is such an important part of our history and our legacy, right? We need to put, water cannons. There's all these big ideas that other cities have done. Well, I went down and I hung out on the bridge there, and I just kind of looked at it, and I walked through the woods here, and I thought, this is a beautiful, beautiful place as it is. There's 2 different colors of water. Oftentimes it merged together right there. There's this little delta, that changes, right? It builds up over time, and then a big flood comes along and pushes it away. The vegetation comes and goes. I thought this was some Ivy League school I had never heard of in the background there, and I was wrong. But that's a beautiful building that needs to be celebrated, right? So I think that my thought was, rather than decorating it, let's just emphasize it. And so the idea became, let's build a little pedestrian bridges that kind of bring you around this thing. And this is, I think it's Columbia Street Bridge. Let's make that a place that you can actually hang out on that bridge like we talked earlier. And this becomes an art place. And so what happens is at night, just at dusk, all the lights go down, and then this kind of blue glow just kind of comes up. Or maybe it's this sort of cyan green that just sort of takes over. And it's all about just emphasizing the beauty that's there, making you think differently about it for a moment. And if you're sitting on the bridge during the day, it might look like that. But in the evening, people bring out their chairs and they're like, hey, are you guys going to go down to the dimming of the lights at dusk today? And people hang out and they talk to their neighbors and they have a great time. And it helps these little cues make happy, healthy communities, right? Where people are excited about their neighbors. They want to meet them. They want to go out and do things with them. And these places like this, I don't think there's a sphere of confluence anywhere else in the world, so this is good. Okay, so what happens next? Next is we want to do this whole plan, right? But we're going to do it in phases. The first thing we're going to do is continue to raise awareness of the riverfront. We're going to do more boat tours. Dan, I'm sure, will take you tomorrow if you want to go in the snow. We need people to come out and volunteer to help clean up the rivers and do things with that. We're going to figure out what the correct governing entity is. Is it a foundation? Is it Friends of the River? Or is it the city government? We don't know that yet, but that needs to be determined. Fundraising, we need to get some land. We have some land. We're going to get some more land. Develop these public-private partnerships. Find developers that we want to work with that want to do the things that we want to do as opposed to just the things they want to do. And then we got to get into doing detailed design construction documents for phase 1. That could take a year. Then we need to do the actual building of it. That's probably 18 months of construction. So these are the things that are happening already. There's other things that are going, like the big deck at Don Hall's is, I hear, being renovated. The outfitters, they're growing and getting bigger. There's dragon boat festivals that are coming up. All these little things are starting to, create a tipping point. There's river maintenance that we want to go out and do, and I think if we can get sort of volunteers to come together and figure out how to do these things, but we're going to do a river maintenance plan as a part of this this whole ongoing study. And in the end, this is what we get. This beautiful place that I think is uniquely Fort Wayne, that's very different from any place else in the country that I know of, and we go around the country and we do lots of projects like this. So that's it. I'm ready to go build it. I can tell you guys are, what took us so long, let's go, right? So that's it. Thanks for coming out.